Nation. Ilonka, take one.
Okay, sounds rolling.
Yes.
Okay. Right, Ilonka, I'd say talking to Rebecca is in a story form. Tell us, let's start with anything you want to say about the brain and how these things impact the brain. Your Play-Doh thing, brain trauma, anything about the brain.
Do you mind if we start at the chapter 1?
Yeah, sure. Do that.
Logically,
With
that
your
makes
story?
more,
Okay. So
because that makes more sense to me instead of
whatever you wanna
backtracking.
share- Whatever you want to share about your story.
So do you ask me questions or I just go?
You can just take it from
Just
here.
go.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Wow, the topic of sex trafficking, that's a very heavy, heavy topic. You know, but if you look at what happens in a survivor's life in totality, from the start to the healing journey to where a person is, should they've been so blessed to have survived an awful thing such as that, it can actually be very hopeful to others who might have gone through a similar situation. Very unfortunately, I speak out of my own personal story in this journey. Not because I was raised in an impoverished environment, not because I was lacking anything, but because I was propelled into the music industry where predators roam. And at a very young age of 12 years old, found myself in a trafficking situation with a music manager that ended up pulling me into a trafficking ring for 5 years of my life. That left me as a very young teenager, confused, not knowing what true love from a man should be, what it should look like, what to do with shame, with guilt, with condemnation, what to do with body expectation, what to do with dating somebody. Where do you go from that when that has been your life? Now, that wasn't always my life. I grew up in a wonderful family home, my mom, 2 brothers, and loved life. I am someone with tenacity and spontaneity, and I love to laugh, I love to sing, I love to write music, and all of those things was good things in my life, and all of those things remained good in my life going through what I went through. I was never removed from my home. I was never trafficked to a different state. This happened in my neighborhood, 2 doors down from where I lived, continued for 5 years while I lived at home. This is a very hard topic for any mom or any grandparent to understand. How can something like this happen in your home, 2 doors down from where you live in your neighborhood? And the reality of it all is that predators are just that good at what they do. They are good at hiding. They are very sly in maneuvering, drawing their victims, looking for weaknesses. For me, the weakness in my family was that there wasn't a dad. So any male attention that I would get from an older man, I would view at that age, at 12, as, oh, this is what it must be like to have a dad, right? But I did not understand that there are monsters in this world who do not always want the best for young girls or young boys. And they do have horrible intentions. Not all of them. There's more good people than bad people. But there are bad people. And that's what I try to, as a mother today, protect my kids from, is not that there's not good people, but the bad predators that they are. So as this was continuing in my life, my mom, who is my absolute hero, I love her very much, and I have a really good relationship with her and my brothers. She knew that something had happened with me, and all the classic signs of when a child is trafficked shows up. Signs such as withdrawing from friendship groups, isolating yourself, lying, getting dark behavior, starting to use substances like alcohol and smoking. I never was propelled into the drug world. Thank the Lord I was not. But smoking and drinking I definitely was. So in all of those years, my mom definitely knew that something was going on with me. And you know what? Can I do something? Can we start over?
Anything.
Can we start over?
Yeah.
Like totally over?
Anything.
Okay. Just get rid of all this. Okay? Okay.
You don't, Ilonka, you don't, I'm
Yeah.
not expecting you to do any coloring of the past, but whatever.
No,
you
no,
do,
no.
Yeah.
No. I took a sabbatical a year and 5 months ago. I haven't talked about my story since in a year and a half, because I took a sabbatical, I took this position, and I just haven't. So as I'm sitting here, I'm like, hey, you're making some mistakes. I'm just wrapping my head around again, like speaking. So give me a second. All right. I grew up in a wonderful home. Single parent family, though. Two brothers who I absolutely drove crazy. I'm a singer, I'm a songwriter. I love life. I'm spontaneous, I love to laugh. I like to do things that make me feel good, and one of those things is music. I grew up in Johannesburg, South Africa, and enjoyed my young years. My mother, hero of my life, was a single parent. She worked extremely hard to raise 3 kids by herself. My dad was around, but he wasn't in the picture, as I would say. He wasn't a daddy, but he was around. But Mom really carried the weight of raising me and my 2 brothers. At 12 years old, I was invited to attend a talent show, kind of like an American Idol, but way before American Idol actually existed. And I was invited to this program by my neighbor who lived 2 doors down from me. Her name was Taryn. Taryn's mom was dating a guy at the time who was a music man. He was a music manager. He was someone who knew everybody in the music industry and had connections, and the glitz and the glamour of that whole world that was so inviting to me. I took this pamphlet home to my mom and I said, hey, I want to enter this competition. Mom agreed. I entered into the competition. My brothers came, everybody came. I went and I sang and I went through all the rounds, and I ended up winning this competition singing Whitney Houston's The Greatest Love of All. And I was absolutely thrilled. I won $50, which was the most money I'd ever made. But most importantly, I had a pathway to have this pop career. And if you've ever had a love for singing or wanted to be in the music industry, you know that that is like a golden ticket. It's like getting Willy Wonka's chocolate bar and you've got that golden ticket and boy, you're going to go, you're going to do it. Well, it took Mom some thinking to process, does she really want me to enter into that kind of a career so young? Well, I was pretty adamant, being an A-type personality, and Mom agreed, and I went off and started my career. And the first year was fantastic. I sang and I made my first record, and I made publicists and producers and songwriters and all kinds of things, and it was wonderful. And what was great about it is it wasn't just me that entered into this, it was my entire family. Mom was there, Jaco was there, my other brother Bjorn was there, and they were supporting my efforts in what I was doing, and everybody was kind of enjoying, where we were going. Well, as I mentioned, the music manager, Mike, who was still dating Terrence's mom at that time, who's the one that helped me enter into this competition, ended up becoming my music manager. Well, Mike taught me a lot about music at first. He taught me about CCR. He taught me about Cat Stevens. He taught me music scales that I had never thought of before, ways to sing things that I had not heard, ways to look at the music industry that I couldn't fathom. And I learned quite a lot from him. And he, to give you perspective, he's older than my mother, so he fit into that fatherly figure space in my brain. So I looked up to him, I took what he had to say, and I really admired him for the first year. So what happened a year in? A year in, my life changed. A year in, I realized that it wasn't all glitz and glamour, and that sometimes people just do not have the best intentions for you, and they show you their true colors. I have a saying in my life that I follow: if someone shows you their true colors, believe it, take it for what it is, and move on. And Mike showed me his true colors. A year into my career, my mom allowed him to take me to a rehearsal, to come and pick me up at home and take me. This was the first time ever that she allowed him to come and pick me up by himself and take me to the rehearsal. This year that we've had with Mike, we trusted him. We learned how to trust him. We became friends with his family. We became friends with his children. This is someone that has become part of our lives. And I share this because I want our viewers to really understand how slow and methodical predators are. They are not fast moving. They move slow. They are very meticulous, and they are extremely cowardly. So it's always going to be someone who stands behind the door pretending to be your friend and to be nice. But their intentions will not be revealed till much later, when they've actually have you in their grips and they can control the environment. He picked me up to this rehearsal, and when we got there, we were the only people there, and that was the first time that he raped me. After he did that, I saw the true man. The true dark monster, as I would call it, that he is. When he became the violent person, when he became the obscene person, when he became the dark music manager, when he became the controlling freak that he really is. And all of that comes out of insecurity. I know that now. I did not know that then as a 12-year-old. He threatened to kill me if I said anything, and I believed him. Threatened to kill my mom. My mom was the only person in my life that was a parent. My dad was there, but like I said, he really wasn't in the picture. I could not rely on him. So why would I want anybody to hurt my mom? So in a split second, I made a decision that I was going to protect my family. Did anyone ask me to do that? No. Did mom ask me to do that? No. I made that decision in a split second when he threatened my family, that I would do whatever it took to protect them, because I wanted to hold on to my family, because that's where I feel safe. That's who I want to go home to, right? So I'm not going to allow this person to hurt them. You can rather hurt me before you hurt them. That is how fast the wrong thinking of a survivor kicks in. When you do not realize in that moment, when you're too young to realize that he is the person at fault for what is going on with you, it's not my job to protect my family in that situation. And even if they knew what he had done, he would be the one that would get in trouble, not me, right? But it's the lies and the deceit that these predators feed you. No one will believe you. You're too young. You don't have a voice. I'm going to crush your spirit. I'm going to crush your spirit so far down so that I can control you. And they know that if they get you that far down and they can control you, then they got you. You won't rat on them. You won't say anything. You will do what they want and you'll go with it. But again, the process is very slow. From the first time that he sexually offended me till the second time was almost 3 to 6 months after that. He left me alone at first. I thought, oh goodness, this is great, this is over. But it was not. You see, my music career was hanging in the balance. If I did what he said, I can have a career. I can sing, I can perform, I can do photo shoots. Oh, I can meet with publicists. I can become a star. But I have to do this with him, right? He was methodical and slow and moving, but he wrapped his dark self around me during that time. He would call the house and tell mom, oh, we just don't have dates for her to do anything right now. Oh, the recording studio is booked. But let me explain to her myself. Then he would get on the phone with me and say, you know what you need to do if you want to have this career. And if you want to be a good girl, then you will do this. Right? Trapped in fear, trapped in shame, guilt, condemnation. Don't want to be found out. How do I do this? Eventually, okay, he's not going to do this again. I'm just going to show up to this one event, but he's not going to do it again. And then he does it again. And again, and again, and again, and again. And before you know it, you're a shell of yourself. You don't know who you are. You don't know you're up from your down. You don't recognize yourself, because you have to become a survivor in a situation like that to survive that. It's unnatural, it's unnormal. So you have to be unnatural and unnormal to fit into that kind of a world. It's dark, it's depressing, it's dark, it's filled with anxiety. And I had hoped at the beginning of all that was it, but it was not. Close to a year into when all of this happened, it's the first time that he exposed the rest of the trafficking group to me. And I tell you what, it's pretty scary. everyone in the ring that he worked with were all major CEOs of companies, very wealthy individuals, 100% Caucasian, all of them. Every single one of them had a wife and kids, every single one of them. And they were established in the communities, they were loved, they were well known, they had huge positions and wealth. So you would never think, like, how does someone rise to such excellence in an industry? And it was all kind of different industries, but how do they rise into this kind of an industry, being so good at what they do, but they have this dark demonic side to them, where they will use underage girls and traffic them and have sex with them, knowing that it's against the law because they know what they're doing is wrong. It's not right. But yet there's a group of them who kind of buff themselves up, like this is our group, this is our club, and we're going to do this. And then you realize I'm not the only girl in this. And then you start meeting all the other 14, 15, 16-year-olds in the situation. And you realize, oh wow, they're like me. They pretend to be someone else. They are called by nicknames. They lie to their mothers, to their fathers. So I'm just part of them. So then you get a sense of belonging in this very sick way of that this is kind of like a gang that you're part of. And this is just the way that life is going to be. So you pretend, you lie, you're not who you say you are, you get called by a nickname, and then when you go home to your family, then you pretend again to be something that they want you to be, but that's really the person that you are. And you lose your worth and your value along the way, and you lose the sight of God. I was raised in a Christian home. We went to church on Wednesday nights and Sundays. I was in youth group. I knew Jesus from the time that I can remember being a little child. Yet when that kind of darkness enters your life, you don't see how the light of God meets up with that. And it wasn't until much later in my life that I realized a switch had to be flipped in my life for the darkness to be eradicated. Did Jesus ever go away in my life? No. Did God ever disappear in my life? No. Am I mad at God for what happened? No. I'm mad at Mike for doing what he did, for pulling me into that situation. He's the one to blame for all of it. The enemy used him. Is he a broken man? Yes. Have I forgiven him with my whole heart? Do I ever want to see him again? No. Do I want reconciliation with him? Absolutely not. But I do have forgiveness for him. But how did I get there from where I was? 17 years old, I was rescued out of this horrid situation by an undercover cop who had no idea what was going on with me. He was moonlighting at a casino, and he ended up just walking into a situation where Mike was physically attacking me because I did not want to have sex with him again. And I thought, you know what, if I die this day, it's okay. I'm going to fight. Today I'm fighting. Today I'm fighting, and this is going to be the end. And I so wish that I would have had that courage and that bravery when I was 14, because predators are such cowards. They're such cowards that if you stand up to them, like what you would do with a bully, they back off. You know what he did? He ran out of the dressing room when the police officer intervened, broke free, and he went into hiding for years. For years. I have never seen him since that day. To date, I've never seen him. Don't want to see him. Never seen him. They're cowards. That's one of the big things for young girls. If you are being treated unfairly by a boyfriend or by a father who's raping you, is to stand up and say, you are not doing this to me. To have the courage and the bravery to say, don't do this to me, because they are probably going to back off if you make your voice loud enough. And if you decide this is the day, I am just not doing this, I'm drawing the line, and you make enough noise to draw attention for someone to help you, then someone will come, to help you. So after I was rescued at 17, I ran away from home because I couldn't explain to my mom what had happened. In essence, I went into hiding as well myself. And my mom and my brother, and then one of my brother's friends, it took them quite some time to find me, but they eventually did. I think it was my brother and one of his friends. He might be able to share more of that, but when they came to find me, they found me, and I'll never forget one of the very last entertaining gigs that I played in South Africa was in a place called Zimbabwe. And they picked me up. Mom and my brother picked me up, and we drove to Zimbabwe, which was like hours away from where they found me. And I was still contracted to sign, to go and perform. They picked me up, and it was one of the most precious mini vacations that I'd ever had, because I was with them after running away, them still not knowing the entirety of what had happened. But when they showed up to get me, there was no judgment. They just said, come, we're going to go with you to this place. And we've brought tennis rackets with us. So they have a tennis court. Let's just go play tennis and have a good time. We went, I did the gig, I sang. And Yaku and I, my brother, we played tennis, I think, 2 a.m. that morning. We just played tennis. And it was one of the best memories that I have post everything that had happened, because my mom didn't sit next to me as a 17-year-old saying, I demand that you tell me the entirety of everything that had happened, and why are you like this, and why did you run away? Those things came later, but the acceptance from them came first, which is really, really key to any survivor, because there's so much guilt and condemnation and shame that you carry with you as a victim. When a loved one meets you with shame and guilt and condemnation, it makes you shut down. You do not want to share, because you feel like they are part of the group that did this to you, right? From that point forward, I moved to the United States in 2001 to pursue a music career, and Mom came with me. And I loved the fact that I was going to come to Nashville because I love to sing. And I wanted to learn how to write. But I also wanted to run away from my past. I know what it feels like to be in the midst of evil when it becomes silent. And I never want to go there again. It's one of the scariest things I've ever experienced in my life. When evil is standing in front of you and it's silent. It's terrifying. So I wanted to run away from that darkness as far as I could. So coming to the US, yes, for music and writing, but it was also to run, from my past, and I thought I could. I thought successfully I ran away from it for 5 years and found myself at 25 years old, married to a person that I wasn't in love with, coming out with everything that had happened to me as a child, fessing up to that I'd lied, entering into a marriage, then going through a divorce, losing my record deal in Nashville that I was signed to, and having no carpet underneath me, and everything was stripped away. And all I was left with was shame, guilt, and condemnation. How am I supposed to move forward with all of these pieces if this is all that I know that I am, or thought that I was, because these predators told me this is what I am, to now go forward? Because I thought that lying your way through life was just part of surviving this. Pretending to be someone is just part of what I went through. So can I not just move forward in life doing that? Can I not just pretend to be a story that I want to be? Can I not just take my past and sweep it under the rug and say, we're just not going to deal with that today, we're just going to leave it right there? Is it ever going to come up emotionally? Yes. Have you ever tried to hide a secret? Or sweep something under the rug? Or run away from something? You can't. You have to face it. I wrote a book called Keeping Secrets, where I tell my story, but I also talk about the very big, scary flame of fire that you have to walk through, that you think is going to burn you and it's going to kill you. It's literally going to take your life to process all the bad, the ugly, and the dirty. But what I came to realize is that it doesn't. The freedom that you receive walking through that tunnel of fire is liberating, and it gives you freedom, but it takes a lot of hard work. At 26 years old, I started trauma counseling in Nashville. There's a fantastic organization called Porter's Call, who service anybody in the music industry. If you're a recording artist, or you're signed, or you are a musician in a band, you can get free counseling from this organization. They're fantastic people. I started my trauma therapy at 26, and I turned 40 this year, just to give you perspective, and I still go to trauma counseling. The process is not as hard as what it was at 26. The shame is not there anymore. The condemnation isn't. The guilt is not. The pain is not. The questions are not. But things still come up in my life that I have to deal with. From 26 to 40, I've now become I continued in my professional career. I'm a music director at a church. I've been married for almost 15 years to my husband, Bill. We have 3 wonderful children. But when those babies were born, things came up in me that I thought was long gone, that I needed to deal with. The healing process is extremely, if I can say this, I can't emphasize this enough, an extremely crucial part to a victim's healing. You cannot skip it, you can't jump over it. You really have to have one foot in the grave and one foot on the grass. You have to walk through the grief of what had happened. You have to sit in it, try to understand it, own it, acknowledge it, talk through it, process through it, write about it. And then have a foot on the grass to say, but I'm holding out hope for myself that this is not where I'm not going to die here. This is not going to define me for the rest of my life. This one man who made this decision is not going to choose the course of my life. Although they say if you are a victim of any kind of sexual abuse, for as long as the abuse has gone on, let's say it's 5 years in my case, 5 years, you multiply that with 3, and that's how long of a healing process you should bank on walking through. So about 15 years, right? Well, I've done that, and it's going to continue because things still come up in my life. Not things to where I would want to hurt myself like I did before, but things do still come up. So what does that look like? What does the healing process look like? Why is it so important? What happens in your brain when you walk through that? And what is a pathway through it? For me, I can just speak for myself in this. For me, trauma counseling started with just being willing to take my first counseling appointment. It was as simple as that. I sat in a counselor's office where he started asking me questions about my story and what had happened, where I could not acknowledge that I was raped for years. I couldn't utter the words. I couldn't self-identify that I was a victim of a trafficking ring. No one wants to own up to that. Say, why would you want to say that you're part of that? I don't, but I was. But I couldn't understand that such evil actually existed in the world, that they would do this to kids. I mean, it didn't make sense to me in my brain. It shouldn't make sense in our brains. God did not create a compartment in your brain to ever understand trauma. This is why this is so hard. There is no place for our brains to have this. God's plan A was purity for us. It wasn't trauma and violence and abuse and rape. It was goodness and love and life-giving. So when you experience this, your brain is trying to make sense of it, but your brain can't. So counselors try their best to help you walk through the grief process so that we can get to the place where we can talk about the hard stuff. So that was really the first step for me, was grief. Was understanding what is grief. Why do I feel so sad? Why, months before I entered into counseling, I wanted to take my own life and ended up in a psychiatric hospital. Why am I that sad? Why am I that depressed? What has happened to me that I feel like this, and why can I not literally pull myself out of the situation? So I started the counseling process, and I started talking about grief, but my brain and my heart just wasn't connecting. I heard what they were saying to me. I wanted to do the work, but I wasn't changing. I left feeling the same way I felt every counseling session. So then came a call. I was invited to a church, Christ Community Church in Franklin. I'm so grateful for that place. I went to that church on a Sunday, didn't really want to go, but my boyfriend then, Bill, who's now my husband, said, let's go to this church. I showed up in fishnet stockings, a mini skirt, hair as big as the state of Texas, nice and big. And I walked into this church, and the pastor, who had known my husband Bill for quite some time, walked up to him and said, "Oh, I'm so glad that you all decided to come, and please come and sit in front so you all can pay attention." He was he was joking, and he said, "I want to introduce you to somebody." He walked me up to a lady named Jane. Jane looked at me and said, "You look like a lot of fun. Come and sit by me." As simple as that. An invitation to be welcomed in this space that I thought was only for perfect people. I sat down and I heard Scotty Smith preach a sermon on the unveiled hope of Jesus. So what does it look like to rest in Jesus? Does resting mean that I wrestle through my faith muscle, or does it mean collapsing? It means collapsing. It means saying, "I cry uncle. I can't go anymore. Don't want to. I can't carry this." Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." But that rest isn't me trying to be better. That rest isn't me working that faith muscle, believing enough. That rest is, He did the work already. I come and He takes the load. I left the church that day feeling confused, wanting what He said Jesus was, but not understanding how to get over that bridge. How do I get from this depressed, angry stage to where He is? Went home, got in a horrible fight with Bill because I had to get really angry to cry. It was very difficult for me to cry for many years. So I would have to create a massive scene, like just a crazy person to, and I lightly say that about myself. I'm not crazy, but I really had to push the envelope to get myself to a place where I could feel something. And I did that. We had a horrible argument. I tore my church dress in half, and I thought, I'm just going to kill myself. I'm going to run out in the street in front of all these cars. I ran out in my Victoria's Secrets out to the road to kill myself. He ran after me, got me, and almost tackled me and brought me back into the house. When he got me back into the house, my legs, it's hard to explain, my legs, it was almost like I didn't have legs. I couldn't stand. I was so exhausted and tired from running, emotionally running, that I just collapsed. He closed the front door, went to the back door to make sure that the neighbors weren't coming over to the house because they saw the whole thing happening. And I heard a voice, and this is just my story, I heard a voice audibly call my name. And I knew who was calling my name. There was no doubt in my mind, with the authority and the peace and the presence that it had, that it was my Creator. It was God. It was the Father Himself, His Spirit, calling my name. And He said, "Ilonka." Why? If Bill would kneel down next to you and say, "Father, I don't know what else to do for her. People are praying for you. Why will you not cry out to me?" And in arrogance, desperation, I said, "I cry uncle." Okay. If you are the Jesus that Pastor Scotty Smith said you are, if you are that loving and that good and that grace-giving, then come. Because I want to die. I don't want to be here. I felt restful after saying that. I didn't hear anything after that. I just felt restful. Got up, Bill helped me to the couch. I fell asleep for 18 hours. This is a very important part of my story, but I also think for victims in general. When you carry such emotional weight with you, you are perpetually exhausted. And I'm not talking about the delightful exhausted you get when you have babies, a newborn baby. Not that kind of, a dreadful exhaustion, like you literally have to have effort to pick yourself up off of a couch to move.
Is there a way to unplug it?
Stand by, hold on. Okay, hold on, we're gonna pick it up. It's just perpetually exhausted.
You said this is not the delightful kind of exhausted you have.
Yeah, I'll say that again.
Hold on. Okay.
This is not the kind of delightful exhaustion you get when you have a newborn baby at home. When you look at that precious little face and you go, I'm so tired, I can't even think, but I love you so much and I'm going to sit here with you. It's not that delightful, overjoyed. It is a dreadful, weight, burden carrying darkness where you literally have to have effort to stand up from my couch and move. Talking to someone is it takes tremendous effort. Everything is effort. So when there's any kind of relief that happens, like in my situation, when I cried out to God and He gave me rest in that moment, it was so relieving that my body went into a state of rest and I just slept. Victims of abuse, sexual abuse, and of trafficking are physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. One of the first things we need is sleep. Just sleep. And somebody in your life to give you the grace and the space to say, it's okay for you to keep that door shut and you can sleep. That was me. When I woke up after 18 hours, I was different. I felt different. I felt the way I felt when I was 10 years old, when I would climb peach trees with my brothers and drive them crazy with all my singing. I felt light. I felt happy. I felt hopeful. And I couldn't tell you what was different, but I knew something was different. So I walked outside and I looked over on the property and I saw this beautiful tree on the property, gorgeous oak tree, 50, 60 feet high. And I found Bill and I said, when did we get that tree? And he kind of looked at me befuddled and said, that's always been there. I'm like, no. That's new. I had not seen it. I was in such disbelief, I walked to the tree to touch it to make sure that it was real, that I wasn't really, losing my mind. And as I walked back, I heard birds singing in rhythm with each other. You know that I had not seen God's creation, birds, trees, flowers, those kind of things, since the day I was raped. That is the effect and the darkness that Satan has over a victim when they've been pulled in a situation like this. It is awful. But boy, when he changes it, it's delightful. You see colors you didn't see before. You smell things you didn't smell before. You hear things that are glorious to hear. And again, this is just how this happened for me. Everybody's story is different. There's a million ways to Jesus, but there's only one way to the Father. Well, this is one of the million ways. This is my story. I told Bill what I heard in the house, what happened, the tree and the birds and all that. And he said, Ilonka, well, it sounds like you gave a salvation prayer. You cried out to God. And I was raised Reformed, so I didn't know what a salvation prayer was, but it didn't matter. I wanted to do it again because I wanted to feel like this tomorrow. And he said, you don't have to do that. You did it once and it's okay. And I said, no, you don't understand. I dropped to my knees on the concrete, on the aggregate actually outside, and I said, you need to pray this with me again because this is the first time that I've wanted to be alive in almost 12 years. I need to feel like this tomorrow. Not understanding that it was Jesus holding on to me, not me holding on to him. I prayed that prayer for 6 months, afraid that he was going to let go of me. As I started the process of getting a Bible, reading John, reading the Gospels, being pulled into a small group at church, continuing my counseling and my therapy, things started to change in my mind. It wasn't fast. Some of it took weeks, some of it took months, some of it took years, some we're still working on. All of it has been a process and an undoing of how the enemy wrapped me and entangled me. Now, was I set free emotionally that day from feeling shame and guilt and condemnation? I was. when I surrendered my life to the Lord. Something magical happens to you when the Holy Spirit overtakes your sorrows. Did I still need to walk through my faulty thinking of how I perceive love, how I thought it should be, how to be a mother, how not to be a mother, how to become a mother, how to be a wife, how to be a friend? Let's just start there. How to even be a friend. How do you do that? Those are things that I had to learn. And trauma therapy, understanding my story, owning the parts that was mine, giving the parts back to Mike that was his to own, very important. All of that happened in my trauma counseling. And this is why this is so important for victims, because you cannot do that on your own. You know, God is very intentional in His Word when He says that we need the body of Christ around us. We need community. And we help each other in community. And it's the same with trauma counseling. You need a care team around you. You need spiritual leaders around you, people that can remind you like, hey, I know that you might feel right now that God is not for you, but let me tell you all these examples in the Bible that why He is for you. Let me hold out hope for you. Someone needs to hold that hope for you and raise a flag and hold your arms up in those kind of moments. So you need that spiritual side, but you need the understanding of a traumatologist who really specializes in recovery of PTSD and what that looks like, and to walk you through that. And you might be someone like me who might need medicine at some point. I have needed medicine. I'm not opposed to that. I have used it because sometimes if your brain is what I like to call on fire and you're offline and not thinking correctly, you cannot do the trauma recovery therapy that you need to do because your brain isn't functioning the way it should. So sometimes you need medicine and sometimes you don't. But as you start processing this, it's actually a beautiful thing that happens. You get to share your story. You get to write your story and you get to tell it the way that you remember it. Then you get to see it the way that it really was, because we only remember parts of it until we get back into it. And then you get to, with God, write the rest. That's beautiful. To say, I'm not going to be defined by this. Yes, is this part of my story? Absolutely. Is it part of my testimony of how God saved me? Absolutely. But is this who I am? No. Who I am is I am a child of God first. I'm a daughter. I'm His daughter. I'm a mother. I'm a sister. I'm a friend. I'm a wife. I'm someone who loves life. That's who I am. That's my worth and my value. But I could not have seen my worth and my value if I didn't meet Jesus. That's key. If you don't meet Jesus, none of this stuff makes sense. And then walk through the process of understanding what happened to me, why it happened, how to process it, how to walk through it, how to write my story, and how to be okay with it. Would I ever want to go through that again? No. No. I want my daughter to have an unaffected trauma life. I don't want any of this stuff for her. No matter how much it shaped me or the good that can come from it, because there is good that comes from sharing your story like I'm doing now, because others need hope, and that's the only reason why I do it. God says that He comforts us in 2 Corinthians 1:4. He comforts us from what we have gone through so that we can therefore go and comfort others with the same comfort we received from Him. So all we're doing is really we're being the woman at the well to say, hey, come see this guy who knows everything about me. And even though he knows everything about me, he still likes me. He wants to be my friend. But I'm also so in awe because He's my Lord. And He's my King and He's my God. And He's done an amazing thing in my life. Come see Him. And that's what I'm doing here. And my prayer is that every single survivor will meet Him, because they will be changed forever. You cannot have the level of healing of where I've been without the spiritual component of Jesus and the Holy Spirit guiding. It just doesn't happen. I mean, I've been on this side without Jesus doing therapy. You go, but you don't change. It just does not stick. It just doesn't work like it does when you have Jesus, because you can't see your worth and your value and how you've been created if you don't let the creator enter into this darkness of the story to turn on the light switch and show you where he was, how he's going to change it, and walk you through that process. And he does, he walks you through that process. Key thing that mothers ask me when I speak at schools or youth groups is, how do we protect our children, from this kind of atrocities? What should I look for as a parent? And unfortunately, I have come to find, just since the sexual revolution has happened, that pornography is one of our most leading causes that opens the door into the trafficking world. And let me explain by saying this. I had the great privilege of working with Dr. Judith Riesman, who became a very dear friend of mine. One, because we shared similar stories in our past, but also because we had a love for protecting children and fighting for those in need. Dr. Riesman and I came up with a theory called the Play-Doh effect, where it's the easiest way to explain this to parents. If you take a ball of Play-Doh and you take your thumb and you press your thumb into it, and you take your thumb out, there's an imprint right there. And yes, if you scrunch the Play-Doh, you can get rid of the imprint. But if you hold it and you imagine that is your brain, the image and imprint of your thumb and of everything on your thumb is right there on the Play-Doh. That is what happens with our brains when we view pornography. It can be soft pornography. It can be someone being exposed one time to a friend showing them their body. Or it could be through a school portal. Why do I mention school portals? Because we have quite a few states, and I mean the majority of our states in the United States have give obscenity exemptions to schools, K through 12th grade and then on to university. Why is this a bad thing? It's a bad thing because that means that the school can show your child pornography and they're not going to be held accountable. You as a parent can prosecute them for showing your child something. You can't fight against the books. A lot of the books that are shown to kids, unless you know about the books or unless someone who is in a parent forum fighting for your kids is going to make you aware of it. But a lot goes under the radar to influence our children sexually. But what happens when you incentivize early sexuality, for instance, with a boy that's 14 years old, we have these great statistics where we have found, through Psychology Today did a great article about this, that you perpetuate aggression. So the likelihood that that boy is going to rape a girl is much higher than if they weren't introduced to the sexual content, right? Because you are showing them sexual content, but you're saying, we're going to show you all of this, we are going to arouse you, we are going to make you feel things that you've never felt before, but you can't do anything about it. Sorry, you can't use that. Well, that goes against the complete natural side of sex of how God created us. Sex feels good. It's okay. God created it to feel like that. Because a man and woman get together and then they have babies. There's a reason, there's a purpose for all of it. But when you take that out of context and you give it to a 13-year-old girl and a 14-year-old boy, it is going to create havoc. But not only that, let's say you have a child who comes from a line of a parent that might have been an alcoholic or substance abuse somewhere in the family, and that child just has the genome to be one of those candidates who might become an alcoholic or might become a heroin addict, right? If that child views pornography, the amount of dopamine that's released in his brain to make him feel good will not last very long. He's going to need something more to stimulate him. So it starts with pornography, then he'll view pornography, he will feel good, he'll go home, he'll have a fight with his parents or with his girlfriend, or something will go wrong. He'll need another fix, he'll view some more pornography, it's a release, it's kind of medication, it makes me feel good. Okay, but now it's not enough anymore. So now I'm going to need something else. And if he has a history in his family of alcoholism or substance abuse, he's going to be prone to want to have more of that. And before you know it, now you have an individual who goes online and he's looking for anything to make him feel good. Zoloft, Xanax. Might start with that. alcohol at parties. Oh, you have some speed? Great. Oh, so-and-so has Coke. You want to try it? Yeah. Okay. So-and-so has ecstasy. Okay. And before you know it, he's introduced to heroin. And we have a child who is 18 years old dying of an overdose. And people look at a situation saying, how did that happen? Okay, well, if you trace it back, something went wrong somewhere. And more likely than not, we have found that it is sexual content. There is a marker, there is a definite marker for cutting, for alcoholism with children, and for abuse that we have seen, and there's statistics to prove this, that something sexually was introduced to that child's life. Either it was a sexual experience, or molestation, or a rape, or seeing too much pornography too young. If we can simply pull back the obscenity exemptions from schools and hold them accountable for what they show our kids, and come alongside parents to say, I have parental controls on YouTube. You need to have parental controls at school for what the kids view. Doesn't help that I have this at home, but they can just do whatever they want to at school. We need to work together. We need to work together. And so the obscenity exemptions for school is a very bad thing. We really, really need to get rid of that. And some states have. I mean, Tennessee is fighting that right now to get rid of that. Alaska does not have it either. And there are some other states that don't have it, but there are more states that need to get on board with coming alongside parents and helping them. So pornography is definitely an inroad that I see into this. And what the viewing of pornography does, it shrinks the gray matter of a child's brain. Oxford, out of England, did a study where they took a heroin addict, like grown men heroin addicts, and they took MRIs of their brain. And then they took 17 and 18-year-old boys who viewed pornography on a daily basis and had been doing so for 3 to 4 years. And they did MRI scans of their brain. Did you know their brains look the same? It does the same thing in a child's brain, pornography, as what heroin does. And that's why there's such a strong connection between heroin usage and children who view pornography. It is honestly the most important thing that I would tell parents to watch out for is the content that your children watch. Just be vigilant to see what they see. Make sure that you join parents in your neighborhood or on forums to fight against obscene materials in books. There is no reason why your 12-year-old should learn how to give a blowjob or anal sex. I'm sorry. What? Why would we introduce that to a 12-year-old? There is no reason. They cannot even comprehend the word sex at 12. They cannot even understand it yet. So now we're going to introduce acts of it to them? That's the problem right there, is we are making children vulnerable where we should not be making them vulnerable, where we should be protecting them and say, no, this child is 12 or 13 or 14. They're a child. They're not a young adult. They're not a full-grown adult. We know that the human brain only gets to its full capacity at 27 of growth. They're not 27. You don't even know how you want to vote when you're 27. You don't even know what car you want to drive, what job you really want to do. Let alone understanding sexuality at 12. And all this nonsense about gender picking and things. We are putting so much pressure on kids way too young to understand sexuality. I'm more of a believer that we take a God approach and a God model, that we protect our babies, that we protect our children as long as we can. We protect their eyes, we keep their eyes and their ears pure. And we help them to value that and understand why they need to keep it pure, because you can never unsee an image. I can never unsee the pornography that I was shown at 12. I remember it today sitting here. Do I want to remember it? No. Can I just magically replace it? No. My brain banked those images. So if we can help other children not bank images like that, they will be much further along than when I was at 12 years old. They will be much more protected in that sense, to keep their brains pure. And I can't emphasize this enough. The number one thing is for us to keep our children safe by knowing what's going on, educating ourselves, going to a seminar to learn what to do, and then taking action. And if we do that, we might be able to have a generation come up to where we don't have as much PTSD, as much trauma, as much trafficking. Because can this be completely eradicated? Probably not, because evil is with us. And God tells us that until Jesus comes back, we are going to have evil. And Satan is here. And there is going to be darkness. And there is going to be poverty. And there's going to be suffering. But can we absolutely make a difference to stop as much of it as we can and push back the effects of the fall? Yes, we can. And that's the hope right there. We are not hopeless. We can do something about it if you're willing to do something about it. I am a worship leader that is a mom with 3 kids. And even with just my testimony coming alongside of other senators in Tennessee, I was able, as a mom, to write a research paper that was picked up by a senator, and they used part of my paper alongside of other organizations to pass a bill to make trafficking illegal in Tennessee. I'm just a mom. So if I can do that, then you can do that. Then you can come alongside the powerful players who actually can affect change, who can make change. You do not have to be the senator. You do not have to be the president of the United States to affect change. You just need to be willing to use your voice and speak up and say, enough is enough, not my children, not my town, not my city. I'm here to stand in the gap, to stand strong, and protect the people in my community, starting with my own kids. And if we do that, we can affect change. And if we do that, we can give hope to victims. And if we do that, we can prevent future victims.